So now we're going to anneal it again. We're going to bathe the entire thing with the bushy flame just as we did before, moving back and forth until we see the rainbow effect and we see that pale pink metal color. And remember that pale peach is not pale peach color, excuse me, is not the flame. It is the actual metal. So now I see the rainbow effect, and soon that peach color will follow. It's a very slight pale peach. And there it is, and we're annealed. Again, I will let it sit there until it is cool enough to quench, and then we will go on to the next step. Before we form our ring, we are going to need to put our maker's mark on the back, and I'm just going to hold that up for you guys to see. I have all three of my maker's marks on there. I have my logo, I have the flying unicorn because I am a certified Argentium jeweler. I've stamped that, and I've also stamped the .935 mark on there. Anytime you do put a content mark on, though, you do have to have your own maker's mark to go with it. Okay, so do that before we do this. Now, there are different ways to form your ring. I have a pair of ring pliers. I love these. They're wonderful to begin to form things. That very, very straight edge at the beginning is hard to curve sometimes. You can also use a pair of half round pliers. You can take your end, make sure the round portion is at the back, and you can begin to curve it that way. You'll notice that I have it about halfway, and then you just gently, oops, my grip wasn't tight enough, begin to turn. And you can see how it starts the curve. I love these pliers though, because I can put the ring in there and I can feed it through. Now, it will not give you a specific size. That is what you're going to have to do with the ring mandrel. But you can start the ends with this plier. Now, I recently downsized my studio, and I just realized today I've sold all of my ring mandrels that are round. I have ordered one, but I knew I couldn't wait until it came in to get this video out. So what I have here is not really square, but it's got some corners to it, and they are rounded, but I'm going to use that. So if you see that it looks a little different than what your ring mandrel does, that's why. Also on this one, it does not have markings. Now, if your ring is a size 7, you do not want to place it at the size 7 mark to hammer it. You want to go up to a 4 or a 5 and then work your way up, because metal will spring back open. If you hammer it at a 7, you won't get a 7. You'll get something different, and there'll be a gap. So I'm just going to start here, and we've got the little curve that I started with the pliers, and I'm actually going to hammer it this direction, the way I have my mandrel in that anvil. And I'm going to feed it up. And you'll see the curve I'm getting. And just continue to hammer that. Now, because the mandrels are conical in shape, when you hammer, this side of your ring is going to come down smaller than this side. So it is going to be wonky if you don't watch it. And what you can do is flip it around from time to time, hammer it on different sides, and it will even it out and continue to make it the correct size. So you're just going to continue to feed it up. Now I am hammering with my leather mallet because that will keep it from destroying the texture. And you can see here how that conical shape is making it go wonky. So I'm going to put it on this side and I'm going to hammer that back down to get it back in alignment. Flip it around and I'm going to hammer this side for a while. As it goes wonky, I'm going to put it here. Now my ring has already gotten very hard, so I'm going to anneal it again. Okay, I've annealed my ring, and I'm going to continue to work it around the mandrel. And you can see how it's coming together much easier. I'm going to take my pliers now and I'm going to twist that even. Move them together. You can see it's getting much closer. It's not round in shape, and that's okay. We'll fix that later. But we do want to make sure that those ends line up and come together. One trick I do is I take my pliers and I put it in the palm of my hand, and see how that added pressure and it snapped right under the other end. And that's okay, because just like with the jump ring, we can pull that back and press them together. So I find that the palm of my hand is a very good resource to use to get those ends perfectly together. So back and forth, work it till it's together. Now it's time to take a good close look at it, because even though we did not texture right up until the end, there may be bumpy spots and there may be places where it just is not good and flush, and it has to be good and flush. No matter if you're soldering or if you're fusing, it must have a good solid flush joint. So once I get these completely together as far as I can, then we're going to take our jeweler saw and we're going to saw right in that seam and keep pushing it together until there's no light and they're completely flush. Okay. So use whichever tools you are the most comfortable with. If you have half round pliers, then by all means use your half round pliers. If you have ring pliers, then use those. I'm going to use my ring pliers because what I need to do at this point is I'm going to put this right there, and it is going to pinch this together with strength that I don't have in my hands. So I'm just going to gently, I'm just very gently pushing. I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to push again. Now you will see that it's together, but it does have light coming through it. I can see that even from here. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to get my jeweler saw and I'm going to saw right on that seam so that it's flush. Now, One thing I want to caution you when doing this, make sure you have a good line of sight, because I've seen people before accidentally saw off a part of the end of their ring rather than sawing right on the seam. You literally want this blade right there where that seam is. You're sawing between the ends, not on the ends. So what it's going to do is just merely saw off any little bumps or burrs or any disformation that's causing that to come together or keeping it from coming together flush. So be very careful and mindful of that. I'm going to place it here where I've got a groove, and I'm going to pinch it together, hold it steady, and I'm just going to saw right in that seam. You will feel it pop together when you do that, when it pops through to the other side. Now, if for some reason one of your edges is a little longer than the other, that could be because when we textured it, it widened one end a little more than the other. That's okay. We can sand that off. Our main concern at this point is having it level across here, and then having the seam together straight. So once again, I'm just going to take this and I'm just going to gently, very gently, tap that together. I'm going to put it back in, tap that together. You can feel it and hear it grinding. The ends are grinding together. Now I'm going to take it and I'm going to look. So if you'll notice, this side is up higher than this side, and that's not good. This side is flush, but that one is not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my half round pliers. I'm going to hold the side that is up, and I'm just going to gently push it down until it's flush. This overall side is up just a bit higher than the other. So again, I'm going to move it down. Now it's completely flush, but I'm going to saw a second time in that seam to get a very good flush seam. There we go. Hold it up, make sure there's no light coming through. And now we're ready to fuse or solder. Now I'm going to show you how to solder it, but I always fuse my rings. But I know some of you have been wanting to learn how to solder. I will go over both with you, but I am going to I'm going to start the steps of soldering, and then I'm going to actually fuse it so people will know how to fuse, since it is argentium and it's such an easy thing to do. So I'm going to set up my soldering station, and then we're going to go from there. Okay, so we have our ring in the pickle. Now, in order to solder, I'm going to lay the ring seam down on the charcoal block. Now, I have hard argentium solder here, and I love to use the wire solder because I have just found it's more versatile to me. I never did like cutting the little sheets into tiny little snippets. It just seemed cumbersome to me. And I don't use it the way a lot of jewelers do the wire solder. A lot of times you'll see them have their flame and their torch and they'll touch it to it. I don't use it that way. But I can cut off the tiniest little snippets on this solder wire, and I can get tiny little snips of solder. But if you're concerned about them rolling, because if you leave them around, sometimes they do, just simply take your hammer and flatten that a little bit, and then you will have a nice little flat surface that you can snip little solder snips off, and they won't roll. Now, because this is such a thick, sorry, I keep dropping my towel. Because this is such a thick gauge metal, we're going to need quite a bit of solder. The least solder you can use, the better. You really only want what you need to fill the seam, but that is a very thick gauge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snip off. That's too big. I want those smaller. So I'm going to cut this one in half. I have 2 of those, and I'm going to snip off one more off of the flat side. But I know a lot of you want to know how to solder, so I thought, well, this is a great place to do that, is to teach you how to solder. Although I fuse every single ring of argentium. I love the way argentium fuses. I love not having solder. And once argentium's fused, it's one solid piece, and you don't have any foreign metals in there. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my solder snips, I'm dipping them in the flux, and it looks like I'll probably only need 2. And what I'm doing is I'm putting them right there on the seam, resting them right in that groove of the seam, because we want solder to touch both sides. Now I am going to wick away a little bit because I don't want that solder bouncing around. And it'll bounce around just like granules did. So I'm going to tap that. Okay, I'm going to light my torch. And then I'm going to just, first of all, I'm just going to warm the entire ring. And come in and out. And then I'm just going to focus on that inside of that ring. It's the heat of the metal, not the flame, that will melt the solder. So I'm actually not even really putting the flame on the solder. I'm really just heating the ring. And I still love having this on a circular block or a circular little Lazy Susan thing, because that way I can move it around, turn it around. I'm going to go around and around. I'm going to heat the entire ring. I'm going to feather that back and forth. Again, remember, it's the heat of the ring, not the heat of the flame. And once your solder has flowed, move your flame away. Now, even though we soldered, we got it up to very hot temperature. Argentium solder, hard solder, flows nearly at the melting temperature of fusing, which is 1600 degrees. So we got this ring very, very hot. So we still need to let it cool until that water sizzles, not skitters, across the surface. So I will let this cool and then I'll come back. Okay, so we got our ring soldered. Now I'm going to show you how to fuse a ring. So I have my ring end up on my block. I am taking my bushy flame, I'm going straight down and I'm circling just on the outer edge of that ring. It is encompassing the edge, but I don't want to bear down with that hot blue flame on that edge or it will melt. But I want the entire ring to heat up to the same temperature at the same time. Periodically, I'll let that flame dip in the center. And now I'm going to move this around, heat this up. I want the entire ring to get hot at the very same time. We want to bring the entire ring up. We want it to expand at that temperature at the same expansion rate, and the only way to do that is to bring the entire ring up at the same time. Now, I've got it hot. Now I'm going to focus on the seam, back and forth, keeping it hot, going around every now and then, feathering back and forth on that seam until I see the signs of fusing. So we've got the water droplets, the flux dancing on the surface. The next thing I'm looking for that glassy chrome silver look. And there it is. Now I'm going to pull the torch away just for a few seconds. I'm letting that settle, and then I'm going back in, bringing it to that glassy silver stage one more time. Pulling it away, letting the molecular structure cool just a little bit. What we're doing is we're working this fusing all the way to the center of that ring. So I'm going back in for a third time. I'm going to get it up to its glassy, shiny, chrome-like state. And what I like doing is kind of bouncing that flame up onto that ring from the charcoal block. There we go. Now what I'm going to do is I'm very, very gently, because it will crack if I'm not careful, I'm going to put my tweezers underneath and I'm just going to tip it over. And I'm going to fuse it again. This way I know that it's going to be even. Because of the way I had it sitting on the block and I had my torch angled, I may have not had it completely even from end to end. And with a wide band ring, sometimes that happens. So I'm going to go back in here. I'm feathering my flame back and forth to control the heat so that it doesn't get too hot too quick. And now I'm waiting for that glassy look. It'll take it just a bit because it cooled when we tumped it over. You do not want to put pressure on that ring when you're doing that. I slid it under and just gently tipped it over. And there it was glassy again, and we are fused. Now it's super, super hot, so it's going to take it a while to cool. So now you've seen how to solder and how to fuse. So from here, either way, we put it in the pickle, we get it completely cleaned in the pickle, and then I take it in and clean it with the Dawn dish soap and the soft bristle brass brush. So when I come back, that's where I'll be.